Every night, my dog barks at the same empty wall. Tonight, I saw what he sees. I never believed in ghosts. I never believed in the supernatural at all. When friends would talk about haunted houses or strange encounters, I'd smile politely while mentally filing away their stories as embellished experiences or overactive imaginations. I was the guy who'd watch horror movies alone at night and sleep like a baby afterward. But that was before I moved into the old Parkview house on Millfield Road. Before my dog, Cooper, started his nightly ritual. Before tonight, when I finally saw what's been hiding in plain sight all along. For context, I'm a 34-year-old software developer who recently went through a messy divorce. 6 months ago, I decided I needed a fresh start in a new town. The housing market in Burlington, Vermont had some surprisingly affordable options if you were willing to look at older properties. Parkview House caught my eye immediately, a charming 1920s colonial with original hardwood floors, a wraparound porch, and a price that seemed too good to be true. During the showing, the realtor mentioned it had been vacant for nearly 3 years following the previous owner's death, but she assured me there were no structural issues, just cosmetic wear from neglect. What happened to the previous owner? I'd asked casually. Oh, Mr. Caldwell was quite elderly. Passed peacefully in his sleep, from what I understand, she replied with a practiced smile. The house has been tied up in estate issues until recently. I should have asked more questions, but I was too captivated by the bay windows and the quiet neighborhood to care. I made an offer that day, and within a month, Cooper and I had moved in. Cooper is a 4-year-old German Shepherd mix I adopted after my divorce. He's intelligent, loyal, and has always been well-adjusted, not the type to be easily spooked or bark unnecessarily. For the first 2 weeks in the new house, everything was perfect. I worked from home in the second-floor office while Cooper lounged nearby or patrolled the yard. The only unusual thing I noticed was his occasional curious glances toward the wall separating the living room from the dining room, but I didn't think much of it. Old houses make noises. Maybe he was hearing mice in the walls. The barking started exactly 17 days after we moved in. It was around 11:30 p.m. I was in bed scrolling through Netflix on my iPad when I heard Cooper's low growl from downstairs, followed by a series of sharp, aggressive barks. I found him in the living room, his body rigid, hackles raised, staring at the empty wall. I checked for bugs, shadows, anything that might have triggered him, but there was nothing. Cooper, it's okay boy. There's nothing there, I soothed, running my hand through his fur. He quieted under my touch but remained tense, his eyes never leaving that spot on the wall. The next night, same thing. And the next. Always around 11:30 p.m., always the same wall. I tried everything, checked for pests, examined the wall for unusual sounds or temperature changes, even set up my iPhone on a tripod to record the area while I was upstairs. The recording showed nothing except Cooper barking at empty space. After 2 weeks of interrupted sleep, I took him to the vet, concerned there might be a medical explanation. His hearing or vision might be failing, causing hallucinations perhaps. Dr. Mercer gave him a thorough examination and pronounced him perfectly healthy. Dogs can perceive things we can't, Mr. Hayes, she said while Cooper nuzzled her hand. Their hearing range is significantly wider than ours, and some research suggests they may be sensitive to electromagnetic fields or subtle environmental changes. So you're saying he might actually be hearing something in the walls? She shrugged. Possibly. Old houses settle. There could be plumbing issues, electrical anomalies, even animals you can't detect. Or... She hesitated. Or what? Well, some people believe dogs can sense things of a more inexplicable nature. But I'm sure there's a perfectly rational explanation in your case. I left the vet's office feeling unsettled. That night, I decided to investigate more thoroughly. I searched Parkview House and Millfield Road online, looking for any history that might explain the strange behavior. Most results were just real estate listings or community pages, until I found an archived article from the local newspaper dated June 2021. Local historian Harold Caldwell found dead in home after 3 days. My stomach dropped as I read further. According to the article, Harold Caldwell, 78, had indeed died in the house, but not peacefully in his sleep as my realtor had claimed. He was found at the bottom of the stairs with a broken neck, apparently after falling. The article mentioned he lived alone following his wife's death a decade earlier, and it was only when he missed a scheduled lecture at the community college that anyone thought to check on him. More disturbing was a quote from his colleague. Harold had become increasingly anxious in recent months. He told me he felt like something was watching him in his house, particularly in the evenings. I suggested it might be time to consider assisted living, but he was adamant about staying in his home. I closed my laptop, a chill running through me despite the summer heat. That night, Cooper's barking seemed more urgent, more frightened. When I came downstairs, he was trembling visibly, his eyes fixed on that same damn wall. For the first time, I felt genuinely uneasy in my new home. The following day, I installed a Nest Cam facing the wall and set up motion alerts on my Samsung Galaxy. I also bought an EMF detector after falling down a rabbit hole of paranormal investigation videos on YouTube. I felt ridiculous waving the device around my living room, but to my surprise, it showed unusually high readings near the spot Cooper always barked at. I told myself it must be faulty wiring in the old house. That evening, I received a notification that someone from the Burlington Historical Society had responded to my email inquiry about the house's history. The message was from a woman named Eleanor Wright, who said she'd worked with Harold Caldwell and would be happy to meet and discuss the property. That we arranged to meet at a local coffee shop the next morning. Eleanor was in her 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. After exchanging pleasantries, she got straight to the point. Harold was my friend and colleague for over 20 years, she said, stirring her tea. He wasn't prone to flights of fancy or superstition. When he started talking about disturbances in his house, I took him seriously. What kind of disturbances? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. It started small. Objects moved from where he'd left them. Cold spots in rooms. The feeling of being watched. She paused. Then he began to hear knocking in the walls. Always at the same time, always in the same place. Between the living room and dining room. My mouth went dry. Did he ever see anything? Eleanor's expression darkened. The week before he died, he called me, quite distraught. Said he'd seen a figure standing by that wall. A woman in early 20th century dress, just staring. He recognized her from an old photograph as Margaret Winters, the original owner's wife. She supposedly died in that house under mysterious circumstances in 1926. What happened to her? I managed to ask. The official record says tuberculosis, but there were rumors. Her husband, Thomas Winters, remarried very quickly afterward. Some said Margaret discovered his affair and threatened to leave him. In those days, divorce was scandalous, especially for a prominent businessman like Thomas. I thanked Eleanor for her time, trying to hide how shaken I felt. She pressed a thin book into my hands as we parted, a local history compilation with a chapter on Parkview House. "Be careful, Mr. Hayes," she said softly. "History leaves impressions, especially violent history." That night, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I flipped through Eleanor's book, finding a grainy photograph of Thomas and Margaret Winters standing in front of my house. Margaret had a solemn expression, her light-colored dress stark against her husband's dark suit. The caption noted this was taken in 1925, a year before her death. Cooper started his barking precisely at 11:28 p.m. according to my phone. I rushed downstairs, EMF detector in hand. The readings were off the charts near the wall. Cooper was more agitated than I'd ever seen him, alternating between barking and whimpering, backing away then lunging forward as if challenging something. "What is it, boy? What do you see?" My voice sounded strange even to my own ears, and then my Nest Cam notification pinged. Motion detected. I pulled up the app on my phone, hands shaking. The live feed showed the living room, Cooper barking frantically, and nothing else. Nothing visible, at least. But the motion detection had been triggered that I looked up from my phone to the actual wall, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something. A distortion in the air, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. I blinked, and it was gone. Sleep was impossible that night. I spent hours researching paranormal phenomena, methods of detection, theories of residual hauntings. I felt like I was losing my mind, but Cooper's reaction was too real to dismiss. Something was in my house. Something only he could fully perceive. The next day I purchased every ghost hunting tool I could find, a better EMF meter, a digital thermometer, a spirit box that scanned radio frequencies. I felt foolish spending nearly $300 on equipment to detect something I wasn't even sure existed, but I needed answers. That brings me to tonight. I set up my equipment facing the wall. Cooper had been unusually clingy all day, following me from room to room, whimpering whenever I went near the living room wall. As 11:30 approached, I took a different approach. I'd read that some paranormal researchers believe certain substances can help humans perceive spiritual energy. I'm not into drugs, but I did find references to sensory deprivation enhancing perception. So I turned off every light in the house. I sat in complete darkness with noise-canceling headphones playing white noise, effectively cutting off my primary senses. Cooper lay beside me, growing increasingly tense as the minutes ticked by on my luminous watch face. At exactly 11:28 p.m., he jumped up and began barking. I couldn't hear him through the headphones, but I felt his body vibrating against my leg. I removed the headphones, my eyes now adjusted to the darkness. The EMF meter's lights were flashing wildly. The thermometer showed a 20-degree temperature drop directly in front of the wall, and then I saw her. It wasn't dramatic at first. Just that same heatwave distortion, but more pronounced. It gradually took shape, the outline of a woman, becoming more solid with each passing second. She wore a long, pale dress that seemed to float around her as if underwater. Her hair was styled in a way that immediately made me think of the 1920s. But it was her face that chilled me to my core. Not because it was monstrous or frightening, but because it was so deeply, profoundly sad. And focused entirely on a spot about 2 feet to my left that I followed her gaze and nearly screamed. There was another figure taking shape, a man in a dark suit, his features contorted with rage. He held something in his hand. Something that glinted in the dim light filtering through the windows. A knife. Cooper was going ballistic now, lunging toward the male figure but never quite touching him. I sat frozen, unable to move or speak as the scene unfolded before me. The woman's mouth was moving. Though no sound reached my ears, I somehow understood she was pleading. The man advanced on her, backing her against the wall. Their movements had a stuttering quality, like frames dropping from a video. One moment she was standing, the next she was crumpled on the floor, a dark stain spreading across her pale dress. The man kneeled, seeming to work at something on the floor. Then both figures vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. I sat in the dark for hours afterward, unable to move, Cooper whimpering and pressed against me. When dawn finally broke, I forced myself to examine the wall. There was nothing unusual visible, but now I knew what to look for. The baseboard had a slight discoloration in one section. It looked newer than the rest, as if it had been replaced. With shaking hands, I pried it loose. Behind it was a small cavity in the wall. And in that cavity was a rusted knife, wrapped in what appeared to be the decayed remains of a silk handkerchief with the initials, TW, embroidered in one corner. I've called Eleanor. She's contacting a historian friend who has connections with the police department. We're meeting this afternoon to turn over what I found and discuss next steps. I don't know if this will lead to any kind of justice for Margaret Winters. Her husband is long dead, and proving murder after nearly 100 years seems impossible, but I know what I saw. I know what Cooper has been seeing every night at 11:28, the exact time, I now believe, that Margaret was murdered. She wasn't dying of tuberculosis. She was stabbed by her husband, her body concealed, perhaps buried somewhere on the property while Thomas told everyone she was bedridden with illness. When she was reported dead, no one questioned it. I'm writing this down partly to maintain my sanity, partly because I need others to know what happened in this house. Cooper hasn't barked at the wall since I found the knife. It's as if Margaret was waiting for someone to discover the truth, to find the evidence her husband thought he'd hidden forever. I don't know if I'll stay in this house. Part of me feels I should, that someone should bear witness to what happened to Margaret Winters. Another part can't imagine sleeping peacefully here again. All I know for certain is that I'll never again doubt the things dogs can see that we cannot. And I'll never dismiss someone's ghost story so quickly. Because sometimes, the veil between our world and whatever lies beyond is thinner than we think. Sometimes, all it takes is the darkness, the silence, and the willingness to see. Update, 24 hours later, the police came and took the knife. They seemed skeptical but professional. Eleanor's historian friend confirmed that Thomas Winters had reported his wife dying of tuberculosis in their bedroom, not the living room. There's now an investigation into whether the remains found in the Rose Garden during a 1955 renovation, assumed to be from an old pet cemetery, might actually be human. Cooper slept through the night for the first time in weeks. So did I. But this morning, going through some old newspapers Eleanor brought over, I found something that made my blood run cold. An article from 1927 about Thomas Winters' second wife falling down the stairs to her death, just a year after they married. The article mentioned he found her body at 11:28 p.m. when he returned home from a business meeting, the exact same time. Cooper just started barking again, but he's not looking at the wall this time. He's looking at the stairs. Update, 1 week later, forensics confirmed the knife had human blood residue. They're exhuming the remains found in 1955. I've moved Cooper and myself to a hotel temporarily. Eleanor found records suggesting 3 women connected to this house died under suspicious circumstances, all reportedly found by Thomas Winters. All at exactly 11:28 p.m. I'm not going back. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. And some houses never forget what happened within their walls.